what actually happens when you want to feed your mulga to the cattle? Now, my understanding is that farmers push mulga or roll mulga, and don't. My understanding is that mulga regrows after it's pushed anyway. So pushing it over for the cattle to reach it doesn't really wreck the vegetation.
Absolutely not. No, that's right. You're on the money there, Ruth. We push it over when the tree becomes too high for the cattle to reach. We essentially push it over with a bulldozer or cut it with a chainsaw. A very large portion of those trees continue to grow, and for those that don't grow, there is a million seedlings coming up anyway. So essentially, it's something we can't get rid of, and we don't want to get rid of it. It's our feed source.
That's right. But by the same token, you want to keep as much, you want to keep it down. The cattle feeding it, they, cattle have a superpower. They turn vegetation into protein, and so
That's
you
right.
you want to you want to use sorry, you want to use that vegetation to feed your cattle. And I guess I'm of the view that nothing really bad happens when you use that vegetation and look after your land and manage your land. In fact, farmers have a financial interest in making sure their land is well managed.
Absolutely, Ruth. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
left unchecked, we end up in a situation where uh, we wouldn't be sustainable. We could not survive here without physically managing our vegetation either with fire or with heavy machinery. There's no other way around that. I mean, as I said
Right.
earlier, prior to Europe, was done with fire. Um, so that was nature's way of keeping the
Mm-hmm.
balance right. If we
That's
just
right.
lock it up, don't use fire and don't use equipment, essentially we end up with a tree desert. It's very bad for the environment. So it's having the negative effect of what government are purporting to be trying to achieve.
That's right.
But as I said, it's
Yeah. And
just a
and when
deceitful.
sorry, go ahead.
It's nothing about. It's all about uh, carbon emissions, global warming, all of this rubbish.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'd back our farmers over Paris any day. And I do, yes, I have. When I first found out about what Property Rights Australia was doing, I mean, Ron Banish and Ashley Mackay have done a wonderful job, protecting the interest of farmers. And Jo Ray, I think, is the current chairman. She's done a marvelous job, and that's where I met you. Was out at the Property Rights Australia conference out in Charleville. Um, and again, the that just concerns me. Now, that sort of carry on that would devalue a property if it was. I just can't
Absolutely.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then of course, if you've got a mortgage on the property, that might flag the banks to come in and muscle you around even more. So first you're monstered by Mother Nature, you're roughhoused by the government, and then the banks come in and finish you off. That should be concerning for everyone who lives in the city that can't keep a cow on their balcony, to tell you the truth. That's now.
Well, particularly in light of the fact that we're trying to produce food. We're not out here making dangerous chemicals or illicit drugs or trying to destroy, the environment. We're here producing food for people such as yourself. There's nothing negative about what we're trying to do here. It's only creating the essentials of life.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
I mean,
right. Yeah,
we're pushed into a legislated drought, Ruth.
I know. And to me, I regard this as a national security and a food security issue. You know, I think more and more people are looking at exactly where their food comes from, and in my view, we get an awful lot of big multinational conglomerates trying to sell us packaged food, where my preference, my own personal preference, is to go right to the source. You know, if I'm going to eat vegetables, I buy them from the local markets. And if I buy meat, I go to a regional butcher because I know where that meat comes from. I can, you know, if I ask the butcher that I want beef that's 4 days old rather than 10 days old, he'll do that for me. And I really appreciate that. And I think there's a strong move towards better eating and healthier eating and knowing where your food comes from. And I certainly don't want to be put in the position where I have to buy imported goods because the governments have monstered our farmers to the point where they can't produce food.
Well, that's the point we're at now, Ruth. We're at that point where government are interfering with our food supply, you know, and that should never happen. That's just totally off limits. So it is an extremely concerning situation.